Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Juggernaut, and today I want to show you something really special and interesting for the Total War franchise. Special and interesting in several ways, but basically the topic of the video, if you couldn't guess it from the title, is we're going to be dealing with the biggest map in any of the Total War games since the original, which I think was Medieval, and then we moved on to Shogun and so on and so forth, Rome, to eventually what was for a long time considered the biggest map, Empire Total War, to this, the Immortal Empires. Well, first it was Mortal Empires, now Immortal Empires. This is considered by many to be the biggest map in any Total War game. Biggest both in terms of the scale of the regions that it represents. This is, I think, not the entire planet in terms of, or not the entire Warhammer world, let's say, but it's a large chunk of it. You have stuff from all the way down here to these estuaries and oddly shaped mountains and stuff, to the old world, to, you know, the donut as they call it, to stuff over here. The map is truly massive. At the beginning of the game boasts around 200 to 250 factions. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I think it's 230 something if I remember right. So an insane amount of factions, and each of those factions, well, at least most of them, start off with at least one region. Some of them start off with two, some of them start off with 4 or 5, I think, but those are rare ones. Most of them, at least, start off with a region or two. However, half of those factions exist just to annoy the player. And by that I mean half of those factions are sort of one-off. They're a rebellious region, for example, the Empire Separatists. They're not a real faction, they're sort of the tutorial faction that you beat in order to form your first province. When taking a look at provinces, not regions, but entire provinces, the game isn't that big. You see, Immortal Empires, officially on paper, expanded upon Mortal Empires, but it also sacrificed a little bit. It condensed the map. Now, on the one hand, I understand why that was done. The game has hundreds and hundreds of different provinces and regions for you to attack. It's unlikely that a average player, or in fact most players, are ever going to conquer the entire map. However, it shrunk the donut. I'm still going to call it the donut. I'm not going to call it by its proper name. It's just hilarious. It shrunk the donut a lot. This is tiny compared to what it was in Mortal Empires. The space between settlements is also shrunk. For example, I think that the most well-known example of this for the majority of the player base is going to be Altdorf. You can have an army in Altdorf, and in a single turn you can reach any of the 3 rebellious settlements from Altdorf. It used to take 2 turns in Mortal Empires. So the map is just more condensed, but it's larger in the sense of the scale it represents. Now, on the one hand, you do have all sorts of Chaos Wastes down here in the south, and I really like this. Feels like the map is now sort of complete. You have the Chaos Wastes in the north, the Chaos Wastes in the south. You have, Far Eastern provinces, Donut, and the Western provinces, and so on and so forth. The map feels complete, but I would wish that it would keep the scale from Mortal Empires. Fortunately, there is a mod. Mod is called The Old World, and let me jump into it for you really quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Old World. The first thing that will probably stand out at you is that this isn't as detailed as the previous map that you saw. And the reason is, well, this entire map focuses exclusively on the Old World, meaning that the scale of the previous map, Immortal Empires, has now been focused in on the Old World, and the Old World has been stretched, figuratively speaking. This means that what was Kislev, the one province at the Urskoy River, is now all of these things. All of these things. right? And here we go into the Eastern Oblast, and you can see the size of the river, and here the river is actually meaningful. I mean, look at it, right? The number of settlements and the size of this map is actually technically a little bit larger than Immortal Empires. With the release of modding tools, we can now create stuff like this, and the author Chaos Robbie of this mod did just that. He created an old world campaign much akin to one in Warhammer 1, except on the scale of Immortal Empires. Of course, in the process, we've sacrificed some of the map detailing here. You know, the odd little village, hamlet, house, and stuff like that around the map would be a nice addition, but, you know, that would take hundreds and probably thousands of hours of work, and I understand that you know, Creative Assembly would have problems creating a world like this, most likely, let alone a mod author working for free. However, you can see, for example, Vitevo, you can see Irinasgrad, etc., etc. I think Zavastra would be somewhere around here, maybe. The scale is absolutely massive. And, like I said, the number of settlements equally so. The mod starts off with actually roughly a similar amount of factions, but there's just more land. So, depending on how you want to classify the largest map, this is technically larger. But if this isn't, you know, what you mean by largest, then yeah, okay, fair enough. However, I do want to raise a few points about why scale like this matters also. You see, the problem when you condense large regions is you lose a lot of the geographical features that make up that region from both a gameplay and story perspective. I'll give you an example: the mountains. The mountains in the previous mod would, I mean, look it up, look, they're taking up the whole screen. Traversing these mountains is a journey. There's different twists and roads and peaks, and you need to go around and stuff like that. This is a whole campaign needs to be thought out here about how you're going to move your armies across the mountains and get to the other side. In the previous campaign, I would just left-click here, right-click there, and I'd be across. If I was lucky, there was one settlement in the way. So a lot of the detailing is ironically lost because even though this map physically on the ground level has fewer details, geographic features are now less important because it's all so condensed that the Urskoy River, one of the most important rivers in Kislev lore-wise, is now just basically a road that you just walk over and it doesn't matter. Here, well, it's an actual river. It's the border of the province. You can see it physically, right? There's the river, there's the border of the province. And for some of the larger rivers, it's a physical boundary that's not exactly easy to cross. You need to find good spots where you can cross the river, and, well, we already talked about the mountains. Let's talk about the Chaos Wastes. Look at that. That is huge. I believe this is the pit, right? So in the center of it is a settlement, but the outskirts are also different settlements. So getting to the pit is a campaign. It's a whole campaign of several battles, several armies defending it, many garrisons along the way until you get to the center of it. In the previous map, you just right-click and you're in the center of the pit and you win immediately. You get the point. But what I'm saying is, sometimes the large scale of a world kind of seems a little bit irrelevant when compared to this. Because in the other game, in the vanilla game of Immortal Empires, I could unify Kislev in 20, 30, 50 turns maybe. Here, to unify Kislev and, you know, push back the Norscan invaders and all that would probably take me at least 150 turns, maybe even more. Here's the thing. If this scale was to be replicated on the world of Immortal Empires, and instead of the game having 200 factions, it would have 2,000 factions, for one, the game would probably be unplayable because too many factions, too much work for the AI, too big of a game, simply, right? Yes. On the other hand, it is, I think, noble to try and go towards that. Even though it's highly unlikely that anyone is going to conquer the entire map, ever. That most people, if they play Kislev, are just going to play to unite Kislev and that's it. If they play Empire, they're going to play to unite most of the Empire, if not all of it, and that's it. And they're never going to go on an expedition to Ulthuan, to, the Chaos Wastes in the south or whatever, because it'll take like 100 turns to get there. Well, okay, not literally, but it will take a lot of time to get there and to do the things. However, let me show you an even bigger map. Let me make a point about why it's not exactly wrong to have that option and why maybe game companies should consider it. At least something to aim towards, right? Let me show you a map that's even bigger than this. And whose scale is pretty damn impressive too. This is Rome Remastered. And this is a mod for Rome Remastered called Mundum Vincere, I think, but the period accurate pronunciation would be Mundum Vincere. And, this is huge. Now, obviously, we're not talking about Warhammer anymore, we're talking about Europe and India, and Africa, and the Middle East, and huge chunks of Asia, and yeah, you get the point. But also, on a micro scale, on a smaller scale, look at the size of Italy. Look at the size of the Italian peninsula. Look at the boot. Look at Sicily. In fact, I'm going to do this so I can show you all the settlements. Yeah. Impressive, right? So here's the thing. Why is this so impressive? Why is this so good? In my modest opinion... let's leave it like this. In my modest opinion, this game has the largest map, or actually, okay, so in my modest opinion, this is the best way of doing a map. And there is a reason for it. So, it has the biggest map with the most number of settlements out of any Total War game ever, is this mod. You could, on a technicality, argue that Empire was bigger because you had the Americas, you had India, and you had all of Europe with, Africa, Russia, and so on and so forth. But in terms of the number of settlements, Empire was actually pretty small. You could make your way from the south of France to the north of France in, I think, one turn, or maybe a little less than one turn. Here, to get from the south of France, God, sorry, I'm not going to look at this. To get to the south of France, to the north of France here, would take you probably about a full playthrough, right? Yeah, I mean, obviously not just walking a spy or a diplomat from one end to the other, but conquering everything along the way. The mod features a mind-boggling 200 or something, 200 plus or so new factions, and this is in fact the same map that... Really, Terra Incognita over here is a settlement. With Moorish rebels. Okay, that's fascinating. Where was I? Oh yes, as I was saying, it's a freakishly large map, and it boosts like something like 200 new factions. This is the same map that the Imperial Surrector mod uses. So I could use that mod to show this off as well. I have played it a little bit, but I prefer MV for a couple of reasons. It sort of sticks closer to the vanilla experience of Rome, and I'm really nostalgic about the game, and I really, really love it. But anyways, it's besides the point. Here's what I'm saying. The scale here is just right. The mountains, the valleys, the rivers, all important, especially given how insane of an advantage it is to hold a river crossing. The number of towns also is okay, and the number of siege battles would be a bit tedious perhaps to some, but the scale of it is just right, because it's giving you an insanely massive world. Oh, sorry, I've zoomed out too far, it's loading in. It's giving you an insanely massive world. It's giving you everything from India and like the billion rebel provinces over here, which isn't really completed yet. There's only one faction down here right now, but you get the point, it's a mod. It's giving you all of this for you to play around with. And then, once you're done with you know, playing around in India, you can go from India all the way to Spain, for example, Portugal, or, you know, you can even go to Rome. And it will take 1,000 turns or so. And in all due honesty, you, probably everyone else who plays this game, will never see Legionary on Indian combat. I could argue historical accuracy here, and that there's a reason that didn't happen, although it wasn't that far away. You know, the Romans never made it here, but they did make it pretty far over here, so, you know, it wasn't necessarily out of the question at some point, but anywho, yes, it took them, you know, several hundred years to, or actually several thousand years or so, about 1,000 to 100, yeah, about 1,000 years or so, right, more or less, to get to the point where contact with India was, in a military sense, was relatively possible, were it not for the Parthians. And then, okay, so what's the point here, Juggernaut? It's really far away. One, historical accuracy can be argued. Two, it's okay. It's okay that the Romans will never fight the Indians. Jesus, that was terrible. It's okay that the Romans will never fight people of India. It's okay that the British, or the tribes of Britannia, will probably never go down towards these civilizations in the Middle East, in Arabia. It's fine. Likewise, I would say it would be completely fine if Kislev from Immortal Empires never got the opportunity to head all the way down south to the Chaos Wastes or to Ulthuan. Not literally never, but never in a sort of pragmatic sense, in that it would take such a ridiculously long amount of time to get there that it's simply not worth it, right? And that most people will never get there because it would take like campaigns of 400, 500, 600 turns. It's okay. I think the scale matters almost a little bit more. I think that the beauty of a game like this is the fact that on a micro level, just to unify, for example, all of the Greek city-states as Epirus is probably going to take you the entire campaign, right? I mean, along with all the islands and everything, this is going to take ages. And that's fine, because you get a sense of accomplishment out of it. You get some historical accuracy out of it, and also the terrain is very accurate to Greece. The settlements are also, I believe, that this map is not just a work of fiction, despite having something called Terra Incognita with Moorish rebels in it. Especially, I'm not sure about MV, but I'm especially sure about the Imperial Surrector mod. Hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands of hours went into researching every single settlement that's placed on the map. Granted, not every single settlement existed at the same time that we know of, but I'll give you an example from my national history. Nisus is a city that exists today in Serbia. The earliest records of it exist at some point in history, whatever it might not be right now. It also wasn't called Nisus, and the Nisus is actually the Roman name for it. So in 272 BC, yes, this place was inhabited, but we're not sure about the actual settlement itself. However, like I said, a lot of research went into this, and just because we found the earliest records of something in a particular place doesn't mean it didn't exist prior. And of course, we're talking about settlements. We're not talking about, you know, a huge sprawling town of 100,000 people, and we're talking about, like, at the end of the day, like a small village of a couple of thousand people, maybe. For the time, it wasn't that small, but you get the point. You get all of this accuracy, you get all of this amazing terrain, all these amazing terrain features, and you get a sense of accomplishment that invading Sardinia is not going to be just simply taking a navy, right-clicking and taking it over. Now it's going to be, it needs to be planned, right? You can even ally with one of the local tribes here to give you an edge over the Carthaginians, if they have large garrisons, etc, etc. You can then backstab the tribes. It's a whole process, which isn't going to take like 200 turns, but it's going to take a fair bit of time. And then you take over Sardinia. Huzzah. Next. Move on to Corsica. Next, move on to the Balearic Isles, probably, which you may be seeing a pattern here. This is what I did in the previous iteration of London Winkere. But yes, anyways. And then land over into over to Carthage, and etc, etc. The sheer scale of it, I think the benefits of the sheer scale of it, in terms of the gameplay, the historical accuracy, if you want to transfer it over into Warhammer, the lore accuracy, right, outweigh the negatives of certain combinations never happening, such as Kislev never fighting High Elves. I think it does. I think it outweighs that. I think it's perfectly fine that you may never meet this tribe up here in your campaigns. And here's a bit of a kicker. It's kind of already happening in Immortal Empires. What do you mean, Juggernaut? Well, the map has been condensed, shall we say, scaled down and condensed for the same reasons that I just mentioned previously. But at the same time, around 20 to 30 turns in is roughly the amount of time that will take you to consolidate your home region and some of the surrounding provinces and get really started and start snowballing in the game. Around that time, probably half of the factions in the game are already gone. So you end up with certain things never happening anyway. Right? So let's imagine that this map is now Immortal Empires, and that this is the scale of Immortal Empires. Or let's imagine that the old world map is now stretched to the scale of Immortal Empires, despite the fact that it would probably be unplayable, but bear with me. So, here's what's happening. You play as Kislev, you unify your whole region, and you decide, you know what, I want to go fight down south against a particular faction of dwarves. Well, by the time you get there, they're probably going to be gone, dead, or they're going to have, a fair few regions you can fight them. Cool. What happens with the current scale is, well, exactly the same thing. They're either alive and kicking and doing okay, or they're dead by the time you get there. So what I'm trying to convey to you is you're not really losing anything by upping the scale in this sense when we're already dealing with massive maps. There are already certain encounters and fights that will never happen. Like, what if all the High Elves or all the Dark Elves get wiped off the map by the time you've unified the Empire, and you're never going to get to fight the Dark Elves? You can go to the territory, but maybe some of the Chaos factions have run them over, right? The same thing will happen regardless of map size when you're talking about maps that big. And so, I would argue, scale like this actually makes the game more enjoyable. Juggernaut, but I don't want to spend 500 turns as the, Macedonians or whatever conquering Greece and, only after like 500 turns of being able to get to Rome. Fair enough. Fair enough, but I do. I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand the sort of quick gratification of a smaller map scale like in Vanilla, for example, where you would have just a few settlements in Greece, you conquer that, and you can take a ship and land in Rome immediately. Fine. But, I kind of like the fact that it's a bit of a drag and a bit of a sludge fest. Because, here's the thing. It wasn't really an option for the Macedonians to get an army, get it on a ship, and just land in front of Rome and take it. Shouldn't really be an option for you either in this context. And the same we can say about Empire Total War, we can say the same about Warhammer Total War too. You can't really take an army from Kislev and get it on a boat and move it all the way down to, wherever the Southern Chaos Wastes or something. I mean, you realistically could, but what the hell are you doing, right? There's no tangible benefit to that whatsoever. Same here. Why would you just go over here and just take Rome? I mean, okay, you deal a blow to the Roman families and all that, fine, but you'd be so far away from the rest of your cities and you have a hard time holding on to it, right? Exactly. So the fact that it takes so long will also give you a larger sense of accomplishment once you've actually invaded Italy proper and taken all these elements bit by bit, one at a time, and eventually gotten to here, right, to the prize. I really don't think we lose anything that way. Like, not really, yeah? Well, anyways, feel free to disagree with me down in the comments below. I really do think that larger size maps are something that Creative Assembly and pretty much any strategy game of this type should work towards, whilst not condensing them further, right? You could make an argument for this particular map that there are too many settlements close to each other, and yeah, I understand how you would see that, and I sort of tend to agree to some extent. I think some of the settlements are really too densely packed together. Here especially, I mean, I like it. Don't get me wrong. I understand the argument though. I do prefer it this way. But anyways, especially over in Scythia. I mean, yeah, you get larger provinces, but not that much larger. I mean, okay, Crimea only has ones along the coast here, which makes sense, but yeah, I don't know. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this is officially the largest map in any Total War game, boasting the largest number of regions, and in terms of its scale also, it's incredibly impressive. I don't think it has the largest number of factions. I think Immortal Empires takes that, like independent factions, because Rome has a lot of rebels, and they're just not developed fully into factions. But give Imperial Directive some time, and give MV some time, and you know we'll see it get there. But in terms of size, I think this is at the same time the largest map, and at the same time my favorite map. I think it's that for a lot of people. Imperial Surrectum is the most important, probably the most important, the most content-rich mod that ever came out for, well, for Rome Remastered definitely, but maybe for any Total War game ever, in terms of its scale and quality and content and stuff. It's in some tough competition, but yeah, it's up there. And it's one of the most popular ones as well, meaning that people really enjoy the scale of these things. And I think having the option, obviously having both options, like a scaled down map, a condensed map, and a really ludicrously large map would be ideal, but if you can't have both, give me this. I think people will acclimate to it. I think people will get used to it. Will get used to the fact that, yeah, the world is insanely huge, but you can't unify all, or you can't conquer all of Italy in 2 turns. Sorry. I think they would sooner get used to this and learn to love it and enjoy it once it becomes sort of a standard in the industry or in the genre, than to continuously keep scaling stuff down, and then pretending we have the largest map ever, but at the same time, Italy's the size of, like, 1 town, and yeah. At the same time, I kind of feel like we went from this to smaller maps to then this again. And what I mean is, if you take a look at Rome 2, for example, I think the south of Italy had 3 provinces. It was called Magna Graecia. It had 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here, I think. 3 towns. That was it. One of which was a main town, where you would fight siege battle, and the other 2 were just field battles. I understand it from a gameplay perspective that siege battles are generally kind of boring, and you don't really want to do siege battle after siege battle after siege battle for the entire campaign, which here you will often do, but that's not so much a campaign issue, that's more of an AI issue. If the AI just keeps sitting in its towns and doesn't mobilize men to attack me, Yeah, we're gonna have just siege battles. Offensive siege battles, specifically. Get some better AI. Because that's what MV has. You'll have seen it in my campaign and in my playthrough of the old version with the slightly smaller map than this. Carthage can recruit some massive armies. They recruited, I think, 3 full stacks around Hardamentum, and I had to fight them before I touched the city itself, right? The Mamertines had a massive army over here I had to fight, and so on and so forth. There were siege battles, plenty of them, but there were field battles also, and I think the balance is alright, despite having a ludicrous number of settlements. In Rome too, 3 settlements for almost half of Italy, and only one of them being a siege battle. I don't like that. Not for me. I like the game itself, eventually after some DLC and patches. Didn't mind it, but not really for me. I think it could have gone a lot better. Rather, I think it should have, but anyways. At the same time, you could argue that it had the same map as this, well, minus India. It had the same scale, right? Because the same continents and regions were represented, but how much more awesome would it feel if, instead of taking 2 battles to secure the south of Italy as Rome, you took 20, 30, 40? It would have made conquering the world feel a lot more impossible. And yeah, a lot of people wouldn't have done it. A lot of people wouldn't have formed the Roman Empire in its historical borders, but maybe that's fine too. Maybe it's better than having to sort of skip over hundreds of settlements that were historically very significant, and sacrificing a lot of the terrain and geographical features and stuff to, you know, just have a very flat map that doesn't have a lot of character to it. But maybe I'm wrong. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this has been my video on the largest map in Total War history, in the franchise itself, and why the size of the map is pretty damn important, and why the biggest maps are the best ones. If you disagree with me for any reason, tell me down in the comments below. I'm assuming that the most common argument would be that it takes too long to conquer a province, for example. It takes too long to unify Italy, or it takes too long to whatever. And I understand that, but I would challenge you to give me a reason as to why it matters that a certain region be conquered quickly in this sense. Why does it matter that you should unify Kislev in like 2 battles instead of 50, 70? Is it because you want to move on from Kislev to quickly go to other regions that, you know, aren't Kislev, or in this case, Italy? Do you want to unify Italy quickly so that you can then quickly move on over to the Balkans, or to Hispania, or to Gaul, or whatever? Is that the reason? And if that's the reason, well, then I also kind of have to ask why. Because in a game like this, the siege of, I don't know, the siege of Ancona is not going to be much different from the siege of Massilia. The civilizations will have different walls and stuff, fair enough, but at the same time, the siege of Narbo will be indistinguishable from the siege of Rotomagus, or the siege of Noviomagus. Same town, right? Same walls, same cult. Well, okay, not the same culture of troops, but similar culture of troops too, defending it. In Rome, it doesn't really matter all that much. In Warhammer, it does. Yeah, in Warhammer, you fight Norscans, vastly different faction than the Empire, than the Wood Elves, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, even with the scale of Immortal Empires, you still run into the problem of sometimes I'm going to get over into Norscan territories and all the Norscan tribes are gone and they've been taken over by demons. Sometimes I'll head on over if it's been a long while and I haven't touched the Norskans. I'll head on over there and find it completely run over by the Dark Elves. Skaven are usually tough as nails, so they stick around pretty much everywhere, but some of the other factions don't. Like I said, 20, 30 turns in and half the map's gone. Half the factions are gone. It's not like everything's perfectly preserved waiting for you to get to it. Anyways, maybe that's just me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Like, subscribe down below if you enjoyed the video, and we'll stay tuned for the rest of the content that I produce on this channel. If you're feeling particularly generous, there are ways of supporting the channel, and I am very much grateful for any who do, as all the proceeds go towards me making more and better videos for you guys. You can check out channel membership options, or there is also a link to my Patreon down in the description below, but by no means feel compelled to do so. It is just if you are feeling particularly generous and in a position to support the channel. For everyone, though, I wish you all the very best. Have fun. Take care, and I will see you in a future video, hopefully. Bye-bye.